Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Friday night guest speaker night. Tonight's guest speaker will be Don Roth, who is here in Wisconsin. He's just up the road from me about 15 minutes. Well, of course, it wasn't quite 15 minutes when he had the road gone. It was a lot longer. Yeah. We're all happy to have Highway 60 open again.
Yeah,
So,
I
anyway,
second that motion.
so all right. With that, I'll turn it over to Don. He can introduce his topic and take it from there. Go ahead there, Don.
Okay, well, I want to talk about the book of Revelation this evening. And the best place to start, it's the way I look at it, is start it right in verse 1 of chapter 1. And so there comes a question, in a sense. You could ask this question: why did God give Christ the direction to record the book of Revelation? Now, people sometimes miss this. So it's really an important piece of information, I think. The explanation is in Revelation 1, revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants things which must shortly take place. And he sent and signified it by his angel and his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, to all things that he saw, confirming his word. The Father sends two witnesses, the angel and Christ, really. And so this is an important understanding. Now, the reason that the Father is doing this is as it's a matter of preparation. He, after all, he is the one who called us out of this world. And so therefore, this is it, he's has an overriding concern about those that he's called, which is us. This is We're part of that. We're part of the call of God. And so this is important for us to recognize that. In a way, we need to clarify when these pronouns that we just read, right? If we don't understand what is meant by the he and the his, we are going to miss some important little pieces of information. And so, to make this clear, or clearer, let's say, the he in here is the Father. He's the one who's directing the Jesus Christ to reveal this information. Now, why is it that he wants this information revealed? Well, because it's important to him that we, those that God has called, really understand what lies in the future. So when we think about this, this is important. So the Father sent his angel. Now, this is another thing that we need to recognize. And, how can I say that? Well, if we look at Matthew chapter 25, verse 52 through 53, we'll come to understand that. Now, I'll read this for you. But Jesus said to him, this was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and right before he's taken prisoner. And so he says, put up your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you not think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels? Whose angels are they? Well, they're the Father's angels. So this is important for us to recognize that. And so this is the reason, well, we now understand whose angels we're talking about here. And so Um, then the answer, we got that question straightened out. And so, who are the servants? You see, this is another important thing for us to recognize. Who are the servants? Well, if you think about this really through, Christ is a servant of the Father. Why was he sent here? He was sent. So if the Father sent him, right, then he must be under the control of the Father, which makes him a servant. Now, you could say, well, it's like being an employee. Well, when you're an employee, in effect, you're a servant of your employer. You're going to do his will. And so this is the case. And the same thing you can apply to John, who is the one who's going to record the book of Revelation for us. And so this is the whole idea. So if the whole book of Revelation is and basically for the called out ones to understand what is going to happen. Now we can see this in what what he is saying there, and that God is really what God is really saying right in this first verse is the fact that he wants us to understand. And when we say that, what shortly must come to pass. Now, you look at that and you say, shortly, what must come to pass? Well, we can understand this because each group, and as we look at this, we see that we have different groups of called out ones through the ages. And so the understanding is if you're in the first group, the Ephesian group, well, you look at what he's telling them, and so he gives them an understanding of what they need to take care of, what they need to correct. This is important. It's important to the Ephesian group, etc. And as you go through each of the eras, you realize that each one of those eras is being given a piece of information pertinent to that era. And as when we come to the sixth era, which the Philadelphia era church, our Philadelphia era of those that are called out. Every once in a while, I slip up. I should really be more careful about that because when you're using that term, church, it carries a lot of baggage with it. And so, but if you use the term that those that the Father is called, that is making a whole lot more sense. In other words, the called out ones, and who are, of course, we realize it's the Father. So that's why it's important for us to recognize that terminology. So when we're getting down to the last, and as we feel pretty accurately, that this is we're coming to the end of the road. Now, reality is, if you check the calendar, the Hebrew calendar, you'd find out that we're at already past 6,000 years from creation. So this is really an important set of or pieces of information that is necessary for us. And so there's one other little detail that we should understand. And so in Matthew, we all recognize that Christ, when he walked this earth, that he spoke in parables, and he had a reason. Now we we should recognize that the reason is so that those that the Father called are the ones that are going to understand the real significance of those parables. But the rest, they are not, they may think they understand what it is. I go back to the Lutheran church, and I used to sit there and they'd go through the parable of the sower, and then he said, well, here's the explanation. God puts the explanation here. But they didn't have the foggiest idea of what that parable meant, even though they thought they knew what it meant. And so this is an important. This same principle applies to the book of Revelation. You can't understand the book of Revelation unless God opens your mind to understanding his word, the Bible. And as we go through this study, we're going to see how this works out and in what we're looking at. And we're going to see when we look at, well, as we recognize, as I just pointed out, we are already in, what we would consider, a lot. In fact, is a gentleman was visiting with us, and he said, I mentioned that. Well, he said, wait a minute. He says, according to your figures here, we're already past 6,000 years. How can that be? So I said, well, it's very simple. The answer is very simple, and it's in the book of Revelation, chapter 10. And if basically, I don't want to have to go turn there, but what it says is there's going to be no more delay. So I got the scripture out and I showed him. I read the scriptures and see it says no more delay. Well, what does that mean? That means there was a delay, and so there's a point coming when that's it, where he's not delaying things any longer. And so this is part of the things that we understand, that in all reality, the world does not they think they understand. There's all kinds of PF professors who try to explain the book of Revelation. Well, unless you understand, there's some really important things that you have to understand in order to be able to understand the book of Revelation. And one of the things, of course, is the fact that what they look at as churches, they don't understand the position, first of all, of the Father, and that he's the one who, in fact, is, you can see by what we just read in first chapter or first verse of the first chapter of Revelation, that, well, he's the one who is, in fact, directing everything. And so once we recognize that, and this is an extremely important difference, and new people, when they come to realize this, it's really comes as quite a shock, but that's another whole subject. So the place that we're going to start is in, we're going to go to the book of Revelation, chapter 11. We're going to deal with chapter 11 and chapter 12 because they are very important as far as seeing and understanding the things that are going to happen. Not just that we're going to understand the things that are happening, but we need to, because it's there for a reason. It's not there just to fill up space or to, sound flowery or give vague definitions. of what these chapters mean, they have a specific understanding that we need to recognize. And so we'll start in chapter 11, and this is it's quite important. Where's my magnifying glass? Oh, I need a magnifying glass. That's just the way it is. Then I was given a reed like a measuring rod, and the angel stood, saying, "Rise and measure the temple of God, the altar, and those who worship there." So this is the first thing, and naturally, this world looks at it. We're measuring the temple. We're going to see how something about the temple here, and but actually, what we're really looking at here, when we're looking at that word measure, and it's used not very much, but it is used. And if we go to Matthew chapter 7 and verse 2, where we'll see an important understanding of this. And so in chapter 2 of verse 7 of Matthew, it says, for with another one here. I have more than one. Say, for with what judgment you judge, you will be judged, and with what measure you use, it will be measured back to you. See, that's the same word. And so is this talking about measuring? No, it's not talking about measuring. There's several verses that are important. And we can go to the book of Mark, and we read basically let me see. I have to see where I'm at here. Mark 4 and verse 24 is what we want. And he said to them, take heed that you hear. With the same measure you use, it will be measured to you, and to you who hear, more will be given. So again, here we're looking at something. This has to do with the actual measurement that we think of feet and yards and rods and everything else, but that's not what it's being talked about here. In other words, as we look at this, and we see the same principle in the book of Luke, Luke 6:30, 39, 38, 39, Luke 6. And he spoke the parable to them. Can the blind lead the blind? Oh no, wait a minute. Oh yes, 38. Luke 6:38. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. It will be put into your bosom, for with the same measure that you use, it will be measured back to you. So again, here, what are we measuring here? Are we measuring distance? No, it's very clear that this is not being measured. And so once we recognize that, well, this goes a long way in understanding the principles that we're talking about. And so it's important for us to understand then, what is this temple? Well, the temple is in second, we look at Corinthians, actually, we want to go to 1 Corinthians. So I should have a marker in there. 1 Corinthians, right. Okay, 1 Corinthians chapter 3. We can start in verse 12. Now, if any builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stone, woods, hay, or straw, each one's work will become clear, for the day will declare it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test each one's work as to what sort it is. If anyone's work which he has built on endures, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss, but he himself will be saved. Yet, so as through fire. That's important for us to remember that, because this is one of the things we have to think about as we go through the book of Revelation. Do you not know that you are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? If anyone defiles the temple of God, God will destroy him. For the temple of God is holy, which temple you are. So this is plain. Now there's other scriptures that you basically are saying the same thing. And so if when we go back to chapter 11 and we're reading this, we should understand that you can't measure a human being with a tape measure. Well, I guess you could measure their height, but this is not what it's talking about. It's measuring how they conduct their lives. It's just clear by the word measure. So once we recognize that, and we can go now back to Revelation chapter 11, and we'll pick up the prophecy in verse 2 of chapter 11. But leaving out the court, which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the Gentiles. So what kind of measuring? Well, it's a measuring that God measures us to. And so what they're saying here is the Gentiles, and this should be really quite clear to us, because what does Paul say about becoming Gentiles? They are taken in, they have become a Jew. And you just, even in the original, when you go back to chapter 12 of Exodus, it talks about that. It tells them, well, they have to, all the outsiders that are coming in, a great number of outsiders decided to come along with the Exodus out of Egypt. And so God says, well, okay, they have to be circumcised. And once they're circumcised, they've become, in effect, part of Israel. And so all the laws, everything that applies to Israel now applies to these people because they're circumcised. The same principle, we're looking at the same principle here. In the fact that there are no Gentiles, really. I mean, they're Gentiles who are converted, but once they're converted, they're no longer looked on as a Gentile. They've looked on the same way. They're a temple of God. So we can see that when we're looking at this next series of verses about the Gentiles, it's talking about, you have the called out of God here, and then you have everything else, all the whole world. That's the Gentile. It's just, you just have two. Either they're Gentiles or they're called of God, and that's it. There is no in between. So at least as far as what we're reading right here in the book of Revelation. And so when we understand that, we continue to read, let's continue to read in chapter 11, the court outside of the temple, but leave the court outside of the temple and do not measure it, for it has been given to the Gentiles, and they will tread the holy city underfoot for 42 months. This is the first problem that this world, and actually most people who are trying to understand what this 42 months is, because right away they either assume, well, you have 30-day months. Every month is 30 days in length, which is, and not according to God's calendar, because you either have 29 days or 30-day months, but you never have 31 or you never have 28. You just have those two lengths of time. Why? Because it has to do with the moon cycling the earth. The moon cycles the earth in 29 and a little more than a half days takes for to go. On average, that's the average. But there's a variation. It's plus or minus 7 hours. That's all it is. So you can see you can't go below 29, and you can reach out because you have to make up the difference. You have 30, so you have 29 or 30. And so when you're looking at 42 months, everybody, oh, well, that's 3.5 years. Well, no, it's not 3.5 years. It just isn't. Because why? Because in the Hebrew calendar, you have 13-month years. And you have 12-month years, 12 and 13-month years. This is what you have. And so, and basically, during any 3-year period, you will have one 13-month year. And then sometimes you may even have two 13-month years, two 13-month years in a 3-year span. So once you start recognizing this, now you can set aside all these proclamations and ideas about this amount of time that goes by. So as we just so that we recognize that what most people think is not what it really is. And so then we go back, we're reading again in Revelation 11, and I will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days in clothed in sackcloth. Well, the first thing we should understand is these are 2 they're witnesses. Now, that term, that number for that word witness is used 35 times in the New Testament. 35 times. And of those 35 times, it always refers to a human being, a man, a being. It doesn't refer to a series of books or anything else. It just refers, it refers to witnesses, men. Well, we can see this if we go to Revelation chapter, let's go to Revelation chapter 2. And we're going to read in Revelation chapter 2, he talks about in Revelation 2, he talks about his faithful martyr. They call it a martyr in Revelation chapter 2. And I don't know why I can't seem to find it. But and actually that word, they call it, they say that he is a martyr, and that's the term that they use in the translation. But the actual number is witness. In other words, this man gives up his life as a witness to for God. And so we should recognize, and the main point here is, let's go back to Revelation 11. The main point of understanding here is that we're talking about two people. We're not talking about some other thing. This is important for us to recognize this. And so once we see this, we also noted here in Revelation 11:3, they received power. The two witnesses received power for 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth. And so this actually is what gives us the understanding of, and here is why we're going to see where chapter 12, we're reading in 11, but chapter 12 actually is going to come before the two witnesses, and we're going to find some important understanding in chapter 12 about those two witnesses. This is what it's about here. This will give us a lot of really important information. So we have to skip the rest of chapter 11 and we'll go to chapter 12. So we'll start right off at verse 1 of chapter 12. Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and her head, on her head, a garland of 12 stars. So this is a picture that we find here in the book of John. Now, there is another picture, and it's a surprise as to where it's found. So if we go to the book of Revelation, book of Genesis, pardon me, chapter 37, we're going to go to chapter 37 of the book of Revelation, and we're going to start reading in verse 8. And once I read this, you're going to say, oh, yeah, well, I should remember this. Well, you should have remembered it, but it's kind of important because it gives us there's a lot of important information here that we just read over, we pass over without recognizing everything that it means. So we'll just read this, verse 9. And he dreamed, this is Joseph, dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, look, I have dreamed another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me. So he said it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed bow down to the earth before you? And so think about this. Now he's what is he saying? He's saying that the 12 stars represent what? The 12 nations of Israel. That's what, and those are basically the brothers. But it's saying only 11 here because Joseph, he's there and they're all going to bow down to him. So Well, we know, first of all, we know that, in fact, later on in Genesis, his brothers do bow down to him. Not his father, though. Not his father. So this must mean something else. This must mean that we're looking, and it's directly connected to the book of Revelation in chapter 12. We should recognize this. And what this is saying here is that Joseph is going to be in such a position that these, as you can say, his mother and his father. Now, the other important little piece of information that is missed here is it's Joseph's mother, Rebecca, which means, well, she is going to be in the resurrection. That's what this is saying, along with Jacob and along with his 11 brothers. And of course, him, that would include him because he's the 12th, right? And they're all going to bow down to him in when? In the kingdom, not before. It's clear. Historically, it's clear. And so the other thing is a little side to this is the fact that Joseph's mother, Leah, was not really the wife of Jacob, because initially, and this is the way things work, when a wedding is determined, in other words, when it's determined, we call it an engagement time. But in other words, this is an agreement that was made with Jacob and his father-in-law. They made this agreement that he would get that daughter would be his wife. And so once that agreement is made, God looks on it as it's a marriage. It's a done deal. That's the way it is. And so in this particular case, they broke the agreement, of course, and Leah ended up being the first, in a sense, the first one that Jacob slept with. So, but this is the understanding that we should have about that. So now we can go back once again. We'll go back to chapter 12, and now that we've established that, and you can see we have a period of time from creation to when this took place, and now we have another period of time that we're going to look at. So as we read here in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 1, now great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with sun and moon around her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. Of course, this is Mary giving birth to Christ. It's not really a mystery kind of a thing. In pain, she gave birth. And so there's a lot to be said about this. The fact that the church came through a painful operation, right? This wasn't the new, what we call the New Testament church. So we recognize that. Then being with child, she cried out in labor and pain and gave birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, 7 diadems on his heads. And so his tail drew 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. Well, the stars is what it is angels, right? When we understand this, and we understand through Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, we recognize what took place, and in fact, what the future is for for Satan. And so this is what is being explained. And then let's say, and his tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth, and the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth to devour her child as soon as it was born. And of course, this is Herod, who sent his soldiers to kill all the children there in that town, all the young children. Now, and this is not something that's recorded in secular history, but it's recorded in God's word. And so this is basically what happened. Of course, we know that Joseph was forewarned, and he left there and went to Egypt after the wise men showed up. And they were pretty wise, I'd say, because Herod had agreed and wanted them to tell him when they found this new king, then they should tell him who it was. And they were pretty wise. They knew, he's a king. He doesn't want another king. He's going to kill this king if he can. And so they don't tell him where anything about it. They go return by another direction. So this is historical, but it's talking about this so that we have a background for it. And she bore, verse 5, and she bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And so, in other words, this is God's law, a rod of iron. It doesn't bend. Well, it's okay. I can remember when I was first called and Jehovah's Witnesses showed up, and we were talking about the commandments. And they said, oh, yeah, we keep the commandments. And so by this time, I already understood about the Sabbath. And so so on. I said, oh, so you keep the Sabbath? Oh, no, we don't keep. Well, then you don't keep the law, right? So you must do things, oh, no, we keep the law, but we don't keep the Sabbath. Well, how can you justify that? And we went round and round, but it never amounted to anything because they wouldn't change their mind. And I'm not changing my mind because I look at the commandments and it's plain, that it's not disputable. So picking and the child was caught up to God and his throne. So that was AD 30. So we're 4,076 years into time from the creation to this point in time. 4,076 years. So this is a time element that you can count on. It's factual, what it is. 30 AD is, if you go to the calendar, you look at it, you'll see that's how many years transpired. Then the woman fled into verse 6. Then the woman fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared for God that he should feed her there 1,260 days. And so now we see this is the connection. Okay, here we have this connection. So the two things are happening at the same time. Their witnessing is taking place basically in the same number of days, basically. And there's a little element that we need to look at. Okay. Continuing on, in verse 7, war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought. And they did not prevail, nor was the place for them any longer. And so here we see, we find an angel's being named here. It's Michael. And if we go back to the book of Daniel, you'll understand that who was it that was an assistant to Gabriel, which allowed Gabriel to get to Daniel to explain what was going on. And this is kind of why I think that we're looking at Gabriel as the angel that God is using here in the book of Revelation. Now, there's no place that I have found that substantiates it, other than the fact that basically Gabriel is used. I mean, he announced the birth to Mary and to Joseph, and so we have this relationship in effect going in between Gabriel and Michael. Now, so we might think about now, how are we going to know when this happens? When is Satan going to be kicked out of heaven? And so we need to read a little bit further, and it'll kind of explain this to us. But they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come, for the accuser of the brethren, who accused them before God day and night, has been cast down. So it's clear that we've been accused, right? You start right after, well, it in fact is actually, you can start back in the Old Testament. All you have to do is think about the book of Job. What happened? Job is, Satan is wandering along around, and and he comes to, there's a meeting, and so what does he do? He accuses Job, right? So it's pretty clear this is what he's doing. Anything that he can, here Job was doing all kinds of right things, but doesn't really matter. He lie about him, it doesn't matter. It's the way, it's his system. Doesn't really matter. His system is a system of survival of the fittest. This is what we should recognize. And that's what this whole world, when we looked at the Gentiles, the court of the Gentiles, this is basically, that's how they operate. That's what we're living in right now. We're living in this time where everyone is, it doesn't matter what it takes to maintain your position or to rise in and get ahead in this physical world that we are in today. And it goes all the way up the chain. It doesn't matter what, we just lie, Sometimes we just say bold-faced lie that everybody knows is really a lie, but he still says it. And it doesn't matter. Lie, kill, steal, whatever it takes to get ahead. This is perfectly acceptable in Satan's system, and we can see that as this nation has given up any idea of morality, based on God's 10 Commandments, as they have set this aside. What do they have? Stealing, killing. It's on and on. It's exactly what you'd expect from the system. That's his system. And so And see, he's accusing the brethren. And it doesn't, night and day, he's at it all the time. And so this is, so we can recognize that if this is taking place and he's accusing us, it he's still up there accusing us right now. Because if Satan was sent back to this earth, there would be some outward sign that we would be able to recognize this. But as we know that we're just going along every day, and every day he's up there pointing out whatever we do or even what we don't do. Just this is what it is. And so you can see, if we think the other thing is Michael. He, in Daniel 12, the very first verse, it talks about Michael standing up for the people, for God's people. And so you can see, in a way you might say, well, it goes a little deeper than this, but he's tired of this guy bad mouthing us. And so he finally, you might say, he had enough and he got rid of him, but actually he wouldn't have taken this on his own unless the Father said, okay, it's time. Get rid of him, kick him out of here, send him back to where he came from, the earth. So that's what Michael does. So this is just kind of a way of looking at that. Okay, he accuses the brethren. That's verse 10, night and day, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and did not love their lives to the death. Now, that's Revelation 2:13. I'm going to get that yet. Revelation 2:13. No wonder I was on the wrong page. These pages stick together. Revelation 2:13, and here's what it says. I know your works, where you dwell, where Satan's throne is, and you hold fast to my name and did not deny my faith, even in the days in which Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was killed among you where Satan dwells. Now, my faithful martyr, that word martyr really is witness, my faithful witness. See, again, it's one of the point I made before that, and I finally got the right verse. So we'll pick it up and go back to Revelation 12, and we're going to pick it up in verse 12. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you having great wrath, because he knows that he has a short time. And so this also tells you that this occurs at, we're approaching this time. But that's what it is. And because he has a short time means what? Christ is going to be returning. And so that's why it's a short time. And so as we continue on in chapter 12 and verse 13, now when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, to a place where she is nourished for times and half a time from the presence of the serpent. Okay. Now, if we this is really uh, an important, really an important piece of understanding that we just read here, because what it is saying is that God is going to protect them, and the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle. Now, this is this is the key. And the key to this is back in the book of Exodus. So if we go to the book of Exodus, chapter 19, we're going to see, and this is why we're going to make a comparison here. Exodus chapter 19, and we're going to read verse 4. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. And so some people have thought, when they read Revelation chapter 12 of eagle's wings, God must be going to transport us in a jet airplane, we're going to, this is how he's going to do it. Well, not really. He's saying he took them out here. How did they come out of Egypt? They walked out. And that's really plain. They walked out. And now, when there's a lot of things that people don't really recognize about this when they left Egypt. One of the things that they don't recognize is that they traveled night and day. And see, this is why people don't, they couldn't possibly get to the Red Sea, because they didn't have, they traveled night and day. They never stopped. So that is a miracle. The whole trip that the Israelites went through was a miracle, because first they were able to travel night and day. They were walking. They had to, how can you walk continually for 24 hours, 48 hours, and even 3 days, 48, and then it would be 72. Okay. And you can't do that unless God creates a miracle in you and gives you the stamina to be able to do it. And also, he made the way. See, miraculously, we had about 2 million people leaving Egypt, and he made the way so that they could travel. Didn't matter. I think that he just made it a downhill form for all the time that they traveled. So, let's go back to chapter 11 or chapter 12, and in our book of Revelation, and we find. So once we understand this, that we now have a direct comparison to the Exodus, and if we have a direct comparison to the Exodus, what was necessary? What did they have? What did the people have? They had 2 men. They had Aaron and Moses. They had 2 men, and that it did the directing in a sense. Got them together and organized them in a sense, and so that they would be able to lead. And so, if we're willing to take and carry this forward, as we see, he's taking them out the same way that he took the Israelites out of Egypt, then therefore you're going to have 2 people, 2 men who are going to be prominent and at this time in leading them. This is 1 and 1 is 2, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe you can object to that, because it doesn't really say that here. No, that's true. It doesn't really say that, excepting that we have this connection to chapter 11 in the number of days, don't we? Now, in order to appreciate that number of days, we need to go to the book of Daniel. And go to the book of Daniel, chapter 12, and we're going to look at something that's important. At least I think it's important. So if we start reading in Daniel chapter 12, and we'll start in verse 11, and from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Well, that's a different time than we've been looking at. Blessed, now we go to verse 12, which is important. Blessed is he who waits and comes to 1,335 days. And so when I look at this and I'm saying, what he's talking about here, this is end time. This is what Daniel is writing about here. He's writing about the end time. And so when he's writing about the end time, we're talking about someone who is blessed, who is going to live through this amount of time, which is, in a way, you say, well, it's different than the time you've been talking about, Roth. And that's true. And so it says, blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. And so if we just do a little bit of math here, the 1,260, taking it away from the 1,335 is 75 days. And so we can conclude something from this. We can conclude that in order to get to the 1,260, we're going to start out, because they are not, and let's go back to chapter 12 again in Revelation, and we're going to see that they're not free at this time. I mean, they're going to be harassed here, where we're going to find out. So as we pick up the reading here, but the woman was given 2 wings, 14, of a great eagle, which we just discussed, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place where she is nourished for times and half a time from the presence of the serpent. So this is another period of time that's different. Now, when we look at this times, and half time, we don't know exactly how many days that's talking about. It's a variable thing. And you could go back and look this up, and you would see that you can make a calculation depending on which 3 years you're looking at. See, time, a single year, plus times 2 years and a half. And so we know that each year, and like in a 3-year period, you could have one 385-day year and one or two 385 or 13-month years, actually, and not exactly. The long one was 385. That in fact is the year of the Exodus, and in fact that if you calculate the flood year, the year of the flood is 385 days also. You can do that. You can just go back and read and realize this is what you are dealing with. So now the serpent spewed out water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. So in other words, you might say, well, Satan is looking at this last time the flood got our guy, and this time I'm going to go after him with a flood. I don't really look at it like this, like he's coming after him with a flood of water. I think he's coming after them with an army. And that's the way I would translate this. The flood, as far as I'm concerned, would be an army. In other words, he's coming after them with an army. And so, and if we go back to the Exodus, if you recall, what takes place when the Moses says to the people, "You stand still and see the salvation of God," right? He said, everything's going to be okay. The Egyptian army is coming after them, right? In this case, another army is coming after these people. And so we see this, you see the parallel. It's important that we see the parallel because that's where we get the two witnesses, once we recognize the parallel. And so we see, Satan sends an army, he's going to really kill them. And so basically, the people that are involved here, but the earth, really what is required is to stand still, just like Moses told the people. And so these people, in the same way, are going to just said, and basically what they're going to say, okay, if you want to kill us, kill us. Go ahead, send your tanks or machine guns or whatever, just do us in. We don't care, because we know that, one of two things. It's like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. He said, well, we don't care, and Nebuchadnezzar, if you toss us in here, and we're killed, well, okay, we know that something's better is coming. But and if we come out alive, well, so much the better. So of course, this is the same principle. And so how is it that these people are going to be able to do this? Because it's based on what? It's on their faith. You see? And this is it's important for us to recognize this. And what is our faith established on? Is it, I kind of feel, I think, I have this feeling, and or should it be based on facts? In other words, the facts that the Bible is true. And so it's factual. So all of the information that we're reading should become part of us. It should be an unshakable understanding. This is important for us to know this. And that's what's going to give these, whoever these people are, that's what's going to give them the ability to just say, I know that there's a resurrection, right? It doesn't matter. Okay. So if God sees that they face death. Now, everyone has to face death, basically, is what we should recognize. Everyone has to face death. Ooh, I'm wondering, am I running overtime, Don? Yes, I suppose I am. Well, this is kind of important for us to understand this. But
we started about 15 minutes late, so you're still in time frame.
Okay. So, all right, we'll so the earth, verse 16, the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed the flood which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. And the dragon enraged with the woman and went to make war with the rest of her offspring who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Christ. Now, this is this is a I've in the past I've read this over and I'm saying these people, that's me. I keep the command, or I mean, you understand this is the principle of it is that I try to keep the commandments and the testimony of Jesus Christ, and so I look at this and hey, this is a really this is another group of true, and you might say, of true believers, isn't it? You might look at that, and so I'm going to I'm right at this point, and we should be going back to chapter 11. Really, we should be going back to chapter 11. And so where we look at, there's some really important things that are taking place in chapter 11 from this point on. And from the point when the two witnesses, you see, the two witnesses, basically what is taking place here. And you can see this by there's an elapse in time, this time elements that we're looking at, times, time, and half a time. If you calculate that out, you will see that there is a time element available in which the two witnesses, in which the two men who are leading this group, they go to Jerusalem as the two witnesses. And so this is the connection between chapter 12 and chapter 11. And it's obviously made by the number of days. Now, that there's some details that have to be going through this. But the important thing is here is to see where is this other group of people who keep the commandments and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Where is this other group? There's two groups. And we can go back to Ezekiel chapter 5. I'll just go through it for you. That Ezekiel chapter 5 is where he tells Ezekiel, take a sharp sword. That is really for me, a sword, and you're going to shave all the hair. That's where he shaves all the hair off his head and beard. And he takes just some of those and he binds them into his garment where they're protected, right? And so, but the rest are burnt. They're scattered and burnt up, but those people are protected. And so when you look at it, so then he says, okay, now take some of those that are protected and throw them into the fire and go after them with a sword and fire. So, whoa, that's that kind of that's a parallel to what we're looking at here. And it should give us pause here. And so the next important set of verses that we need to go to is in Matthew chapter 25. I have a marker, it says 8, so it should work. It did. And chapter 25, where we would start in verse 1. And this is how we get this understanding that where this is the second group of people, because you don't find them in a place of safety. And so let's read, starting in verse 1. Then the kingdom of heaven shall be likened unto virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. Now 5 of them were wise and 5 of them were foolish, moronic actually. Those who were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them. Okay, so what does oil represent in this particular case? We'll just keep reading, but you'll see. And the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. But while the bridegroom was delayed, remember what we said about chapter 10 in Revelation? No more delay. Okay, means there was a delay. And so we see that this is a parallel here. While the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept, and at midnight a cry was heard, behold, the bridegroom is coming, go out to meet him. Then all the virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out. Now, if you just read this in a way of physically, this is, well, these those that carried the oil, sure they could have shared it. But see, once you recognize that the oil represents faith, now you understand that they can't give this faith to these people. There is no faith to give. You can't. That's something that is only inborn within you. And with the amount of effort that you put into understanding God's word, realizing every time we look at it, we come to surprisingly a lot of information that we missed in the past. I find this all the time as I study and work to present the sermon. So this is what we're looking at here. And so verse 9, but the wise answered and said, no, lest we should not have enough for us and you, but you go rather to those who sell and buy for yourselves. And so this is really an important understanding. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding, and the door was shut. In other words, that's it. You either are at the wedding or you're out. And so this is an important parallel or story. And afterwards, other virgins came saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he answered and said to him, assuredly, I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour which the Son of Man is coming. Now, actually, it has more to do than that, really. And so what this is the strongest set of warnings that we could have, because we don't know. I don't know. If I find myself in this situation, I know what I have to do. And what this is really talking about is it's about taking the mark. And either you take the mark or you don't take the mark. And so you know what this is about. And so therefore, if you find yourself in this situation, you know what you have to do. See, this is the purpose of the book of Revelation, is to prepare us. And this is the way that we get understanding. It's preparing us for what is in our immediate, the way I see things, in our immediate future. So hopefully this will help all of you in any future situations that arise. So we can open it up to comments or questions of whatever you have to say.
Okay, at this time, if you have any questions or comments or like to make, just raise your hand and we'll address you. Let's see, we don't have anybody on the phone. Oh, we got one. For the phones, it's *6 to mute and unmute, *9 to raise and lower your hand. So, any questions or comments?
You're going to call on them, right?
Yep.
Uh,
I think everybody's thinking. Alan?
Hi. Yeah, I find that one of the most difficult aspects of prophecy, especially the book of Revelation, is that we sometimes want to assign symbolism to things that are literal, and things that are literal assign symbolism to. And this is what makes it such a difficult analysis, or a difficult way to understand this book. So, Don, I would like to ask you, how do you determine when something is to be taken literal or whether it's to be taken symbolic? Because I would say that's the greatest challenge that everyone has.
Well, um, first of all, you have to recognize that what is the purpose of the book of Revelation? This is what determines, in a sense, when you're reading this, when you're looking at allegory or metaphors or similes, this is what it amounts to. And so when you look at that, then you have to translate it in effect into the idea that what you're reading is in fact a series of warnings and information that is vital to the individual who's living at that point in time. And this, what we just looked at here, is vitally important to the people that are living right now. I think it's, when I look at this and read through this, this is how I understand what is going to happen. So basically, this is a determination. Well, and you have Old Testament. See, when we looked at the wings, he's going to take us out on the wings of an eagle, right? Or and so what happens? You have to refer back to the Old Testament, right? This is what tells us what we're looking at here. And the comparison is extremely strong. I mean, it's almost, it is overpowering the Exodus and what is taking place here in Revelation chapter 12. It's a lot of what we read in the book of Revelation. We'll go back and look in the Old Testament, and we can find the same pieces of information, and just like we looked at Ezekiel chapter 5, right? We looked at what he did and who were saved and who weren't saved. Now, it was it's in we look at this and we know that, yeah, there were people that were saved that came out of the Jerusalem, right? That's true. There was groups of people that were saved. And so, but this also is looking forward to the book of Revelation. I don't know how many of you have thought about this, but if you go to the book of Ezekiel, chapter 1, and read the description of what Ezekiel witnesses, and then go back to the book of Revelation in chapter 4 and 5 of book of Revelation, and read what the description is that John sees. He sees the same thing, what I call the portable throne of God. And so, how do I know? How is this determined? Well, it's determined because the Old Testament gives us the example. Otherwise, we have no foundation. You see, and so the Old Testament, it really is the foundation. And you could see that when I went back to Genesis, all the way back to the book of Genesis, Genesis 37, we see how this same picture that we found in the book of Revelation, we see that same picture of the woman, and it's all the way back in the book of Genesis. And so we can make that comparison. We can see what it's saying there, and it isn't really hard to make this understand that what he's talking about there is not the fact that physically they're going to bow to him in this physical life. No, this is a direct reference to the future, the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And so this is when you say, well, how do you come to these conclusions? Well, you come to these conclusions by looking back to the Old Testament and seeing the example. And now this is being made to live. This is what's going to happen. It happened once before, and it's going to happen, only not quite the same way. I don't know if that helps you at all or explains, but this is my thinking about the book of Revelation. And well, for another example, another example is the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel and the book of Revelation are really very closely aligned. I pointed out about the two authors, how they are. You can see the parallel between John and Daniel in their natural lives. So you see, you go back to the Old Testament and read what took place there, and now you can go into the book of Revelation and you can draw the correct understanding. I don't know, does that make any sense? To me, this is how I look at the book of Revelation and how I bring out the understanding that I have on it. Now, actually, we didn't have time to really go into this, but it's interesting that those days that we looked at here, when you understand the variation, like in time, times, and half a time, you can calculate. I can go back and give you the biggest range, the longest that it could be, and the shortest that it could be. And as it works out, this is the times and half a time from the face. That's when Satan is taken away or leaves them. So from that point on, see, they aren't really in chapter 12 in their trip, in their they haven't gotten to the place of safety. They haven't gotten there yet. They're still traveling when Satan leaves them. But you see, this amount of time is, if you go back and calculate it, which you can do, then you'll understand out of those 75 days that they're traveling, part of Satan attacks them not at the end of 75 days. He attacks them in pretty much at the beginning of the 75 days. And so then once you recognize that, now times and half a time fits in there perfectly, because that's from that point on, he's gone from them. As far as he's done with them. He's going to make war with the rest, with the rest of the people that are left. And you see, you can understand this, like when you look at the hair that Ezekiel puts in his garment and puts protection, because all of them are protected to start with, aren't they? They're all in the garment. They're all protected at the start with. But then eventually he takes some off. Well, it eventually fits perfectly with Revelation chapter 12, when Satan goes to make war with the rest. And so it's to me, I think about this, and I think about myself. If I'm in, how do I know where I'll be? And maybe, I'm pretty old already, so it could very well be that I'll just be waiting in the grave. It could very well be that. But if I'm alive, I'll know where I'm at if I'm still there, and I'm part of that 10 virgin group. So I don't know if that makes sense to everyone. You see, that's the basis.
Yeah, when I asked the question, I was asking it with this in mind. Many people go back to the Old Testament and find the correlation that is in the prophets with the book of Revelation. And even though many people do that, they don't all agree with how to interpret it. So some will interpret it perhaps the way you did tonight, or some will say it was symbolic, and some will say, no, that's not symbolic. Because if we go back to Ezekiel, or if we go back to Jeremiah and Isaiah and all the rest, then they find another way to understand it. So it's such a monumental challenge to match those things up, and many men do that and come up with different understandings. So that's why I asked the question: which part? How do you determine which parts are literal and which parts are not?
Well, first of all, when you understand the factual, you see, when you understand God's calendar is an absolute calendar. It doesn't miss a day. It starts at day one of the creation, or recreation, more accurately, and it comes forward in increments of 7 days. If it doesn't come forward in increments of 7 days, we're not keeping the right Sabbath. That's really pretty obvious. And so therefore, when I did the work on the calendar, and which is an absolute proof of the Bible. I mean, I can take you to every scripture where it's showing. You can go like to Ezekiel, where he takes Ezekiel and he takes him by vision to Jerusalem, and he shows them what? He shows them worshiping what? The sun god, right? And if you look at the calendar, you will find that particular day. In fact, you'll find all of the dates that are called out in the book of Ezekiel. You'll find them to be quite accurate. But that date it's standing out because it happens to be a Sunday. It's called out in Ezekiel. And you look at the calendar and it's a Sunday. And that's what they were worshiping on Sunday. They were worshiping in the temple. They were facing east. They were worshiping the sun god. And it, when I got to that point and saw that, I realized that the calendar, and it's not just because I did it, because I would, if it would have been up to me, first of all, as far as my background is concerned, when I started working on the calendar, because somebody challenged me. They said, how do you know what you're doing there? You're keeping these days. You don't even know if they're right or wrong. And so I thought, well, in a sense, he's right. But if God's word is true, I should be able to show accurately, show this. And so if you're capable of doing that, then I started working on it, because at the time of working, I didn't know anything about a calendar. I mean, I knew there was 365 days in a year. I knew that. And I went by the months that we went by, and that's about it. And when we were told that the Passover is on this day, and our Passover days, unleavened bread, etc., etc. And so this is, I started to work on it, and it took me about 3 years of work in order to finally know that I had accomplished and I think God wanted it done. He wanted an absolute. That calendar is an absolute proof of the Bible. You can go to any of the scriptures that call out a date, and you can look that date up, and you'll find it on the calendar. You'll find it to be accurate, like the Exodus, like the flood date. It's right there, and it correlates perfectly with the biblical account. And so when you have this and you're able to go back on those days and show how they fit, just like times time and half a time, it fits perfectly in there, because from that point on, in fact, it's a little bit more. It's less than the 1335, but it's more than the 1260. And so that's when Satan left them, and he went to make war with the rest of the seed. You see, you see the anchor to everything. That's why when people try to talk about the prophecies in the book of Revelation and they use the calendar, they don't know what they're talking about. Now, if they take the calendar, that is God's calendar, and use it, well, now they can get it right. But if they don't use that calendar, they can't get it right. You might try to take a look at some of the articles that I've written on the calendar, proving that how the calendar works and showing how it works. Well, you can go to the website, Biblical Calendar Proof, and I do an article on proving the calculated calendar. It's there. You can follow it through. It goes step by step, and then you will see how it works. So this is, uh, this is what it is.
Any other thoughts, ideas, questions?
I just say thank you, Don, for your answer.
Okay, well, you might just check up on that and see if that calendar is accurate. And if it is, which I believe because I have in a timeline, I've done a timeline, and I don't know how many entries are in this timeline, but it's several pages long, and it covers the from Genesis all the way to 70 AD. In fact, so this is one of the ways that you can prove the timeline. I mean, prove that that calendar is accurate, because you can take fixed days that you know of. In fact, you could take your wedding day and you could put it into that calendar, and it would reveal whether you were married on a Sunday, a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, or a Sabbath. It would tell you that. It would reveal it to the very day and month that you got married. Just like it tracks time perfectly when you go back. You can go back to the destruction of Jerusalem 70 AD and the burning of the temple. They know the exact date. And you know, if you go back to 70 AD and you look for that month, you will find that to be perfectly accurate. In fact, is even the destruction of the first temple is cited as being on the same day of the month as the second temple was burned. The first one was burned the same day. You can check that out. And if the calendar is accurate, it'll show you that exact day in that exact time. This is not actually this work was sent and requested. Not, I didn't send it to them on my own, but several of the big universities, Harvard University, University of California, University of a big university in Palestine, and the big one over in Europe, somebody said, oh, you need to look into this work. And so at the time I was sending out CDs on it. And so they all requested these, plus a lot of colleges, biblical colleges, men there requested the work. And after they got it, of course, no one came back and said, oh, it's wrong. You got a mistake here. You didn't do this right. You didn't do that right. The reason is because they couldn't find a mistake. So you're welcome to take a look at it and see, maybe you can discover a mistake in it.
I've put the link to the calendar page in the chat, and here's I just brought it up real quick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I can look at my monitor and you'll see it says calendar generator, right? Well, if you click on calendar generator, you can put in any year you want to, and it will bring up that calendar for that year, and it'll bring up calendars for years like 2025 or 2026 or at 2030. You can look at the calendar and see how number of days, the number of months. And the interesting thing is the Gregorian calendar, not as far as years are concerned, but as far as 7-day Sabbaths are concerned, they match the Hebrew calendar. And the solar calendar perfectly. And that when I was working on this and I got to this, then I thought, this is really a stretch, but that this is going to work out. Guess what? It does. It works out perfectly.
Jim?
Hi, just two quick things. One, as Don knows, I spent close to 30 years in Boston at MIT, and then I did a lot of research at Harvard's Theological Library. I interacted with a number of their faculty members. If you don't know, I don't know about the other schools that you were at, but the Harvard Theological faculty doesn't believe in the biblical inerrancy of the Bible. As a matter of fact, most of them reject that, and most of them believe in, homosexual marriage. That's just a fact.
Yeah. Well,
Relating with them.
yeah,
The second question that I have is,
Yeah.
if you disagree with the calculated calendar, does that mean that you don't truly understand the Bible? Is that what you're saying?
what I'm
If
saying,
you believe that it was the
anytime
observed
that
calendar, like is in the Talmud and every place else, does that mean that you don't truly understand the Bible? Because I think I hear
no,
that's
what
you're
I
saying.
mean, what I said is, if you're looking at a date where it's giving you a date and you don't understand the calculated calendar, you can't understand what that date means. If you're looking at that date and you're putting it in reference to the Gregorian calendar, you're lost. Because there is no, it just isn't there. Think about this, John, when John wrote the book of Revelation, did he have the Gregorian calendar? Or did he have the Julian calendar even? No, the only calendar he had was the Hebrew calendar. That's all. Think about that. So this is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that that it's wrong, but as soon as you're talking about dates and times, and the Bible is filled with dates and times, you can't go very far without coming up with a date and time element. It's just like I said, you can take all of there's I think 12 or 13 dates in the book of Ezekiel. And you can enter those dates into the and you will find them to be quite accurate, just like I said about the first day of the week was called out in the Bible, was called out in Ezekiel. And it's there. Now, if you want to discount that, well, you can do that, but it's there.
Then do you
So
also
this is what I'm
discount
saying.
all of the Jewish calendar scholars who say they changed the intercalation period between 12 and 1300 to match the seasons because that they were off from what they were before? Maimonides and other people talk about that. And are you
Okay,
saying
now
all those scholars
I'm-
are also incorrect?
let me give you some understanding. First of all, I didn't start today and go backwards when I started to work on the calendar. That's the first thing you have to understand. It's the first thing you got to put out of your mind when you're looking at this, because you have to start at creation and come forward. This is where that's the key to being able to understand how time is tracked in the Bible, because it starts at the book of creation. And the next thing that's important to remember is that God counts the day. He counts the day as one revolution of the earth, period. That's a day. That's the end of this. That there's no further discussion on this. That's an absolute. You agree with that?
Yes, but obviously that sometimes if you even look at Joshua's long day and things like that,
Okay, now I'll
Not
tell you
always,
about, let's
it's
look
not
at
always
Joshua's
a
long
constant,
day.
right?
Let's look at Joshua's long day. How you brought that up, right? Okay, if you read Joshua's long day, what will you find? You'll see that the sun stood still and the moon stood still. In fact is, you have to recognize that the whole universe stood still, didn't move. And then it started up again. And so did the count of days change?
Actually, Velikovsky makes a really good explanation that everything didn't stand still, that instead the rotation of the earth changed and then changed back. And I think that he makes a really good case for
You
that.
can say that, but that's not biblical. You can say that, but that's not biblical. The biblical account says it makes it very clear what took place.
So the entire earth stopped and that the seas didn't wash up over, there were no tsunamis, where Velikovsky explains that with the change in rotation. Just asking, I mean, do you know who Velikovsky is? Because he was accepted by Herbert Armstrong as one of the scholars that he believed in.
Well,
I read his work when I was at AC.
look, I don't care. All I do is read the Bible. And the Bible said, this is what happens. He doesn't say that the ocean
Earth's
washed around or
and
anything.
I'll let it go
He
at
just
that.
says
So the Earth's
that
rotation stopped and none of the oceans changed, none of their flows changed. They just stayed where they were at when the Earth stopped.
should I tell you? You know, when I look at the Exodus, and I realized that the account that those people traveled night and day, and that they whether they were crippled or not, they were all healed. That's, you know what that's called? That's called a miracle. And when you look at what Joshua did, that is called a miracle. Now, you can either believe that God can do these things, and I believe that he can. There's no question in my mind about the fact that God causes miracles. And in this particular case, he caused a miracle. Now, in that miracle, if the ocean stayed in place, they stayed in place. And it's not a problem for me. I just look at it and I say, yep, you know what? God made us. He designed us. He knows every hair on our head, which means he knows every cell in your body. Just when you start thinking in terms like that, you start realizing how impossibly more intelligent God is than we are.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, at least that
Okay.
makes it really clear. You disagree with what Herbert Armstrong said about Joshua's long day and the way it was done. That's all I needed to know. Thank you very much.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
see, I don't really, I really don't care about the other experts unless they can come back and say, look, you made a mistake. And here's your mistake. Now you got me. Because sometimes I've made some boners and people have come back and said, hey, you forgot to read this part of the verse. And so, yep, you know what? I wrote back to those people and I tell them, you're absolutely right. I made a mistake. That's what I said is wrong there. But so far, no one has come back on the calendar and said, hey, wait, your calculations are wrong. And see, you're treading on really thin ice when you say that calendar is wrong, because it's a cycle of 7 days, period. Never lose a day, never gains a day. It's always there, and you can check that. You can check that for yourself. I keep track of every little piece of time also, by the way. Up to and not to quite to the second, but pretty close to the minute anyway. Calculations are pretty straightforward.
Gayleen says, thank you very much. Her internet is very unstable there in the Philippines tonight, or in the morning for her. And thank you for your presentation. It's the first time she's heard about the Ezekiel's hair and beard being compared to remnants. Very interesting.
Yeah, it's, you see, you just go back and you see all these things that are in the Old Testament and how they line up, including the time elements. It's astonishing, really. The more that you, in fact, the more that I study God's word, the more that I'm astonished at what it's saying and what I missed when I read it in the past. You know, you read things over, and when you think about it, how many times I've read things over and it never dawned on me what that really meant until then. It was there was some necessity for me to really dig into and look at that set of scriptures, and then I realized, oh, wait a minute. This is really an important little piece of information here that I missed.